when my daughter-in-law posted a video of me supposedly having a dementia episode that went viral with 500,000 views. I didn't argue or cry or beg her to take it down. I just quietly made one phone call that would change everything. 3 weeks later, she was packing boxes and begging me not to evict her family from the house I'd been secretly paying for all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Beulah Powell, and I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Riverside, California for most of my adult life, in a modest ranch house with a garden that I tend every morning and evening. People in the neighborhood know me as the lady who brings homemade jam to the church bake sale and never misses her Wednesday bridge game with the other retired teachers. What they don't know is that I own 17 rental properties across 3 counties, all paid for in cash over the past 40 years of careful investing and saving. The story I'm about to tell you started on a Tuesday morning in September, when I was watering my tomato plants, and my phone started buzzing with notifications I didn't understand. Text after text from numbers I didn't recognize, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, and missed calls from reporters asking for comments about something I knew nothing about. I set down my watering can and walked inside, my arthritis making my knees protest with each step up the porch stairs. The first text was from my neighbor, Margaret, who lives 2 houses down. "Beulah, honey, are you okay? Just saw the video. Call me." The second was from my old colleague from the school district, where I taught 4th grade for 35 years. "Can't believe what that girl did to you. Stay strong." The third was from a phone number I didn't recognize. "You poor thing. That daughter-in-law of yours should be ashamed." I sat down at my kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd graded thousands of spelling tests, and helped my late husband Harold balance our checkbooks every month, and opened my phone properly for the first time that morning. The notification screen was flooded with alerts from Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok, which I barely knew how to use. My granddaughter had set up these accounts for me years ago, insisting I needed to stay connected with family. But I mostly used them to look at photos of her college life and share pictures of my garden vegetables. When I clicked on Facebook, the first thing I saw was my daughter-in-law Cassandra's profile. She had posted a video 12 hours earlier, and it already had been shared over 3,000 times, with comments flooding in faster than I could read them. The thumbnail showed me standing in what looked like my own kitchen, wearing my blue floral housecoat, holding a coffee mug and looking confused. The caption read, "When your mother-in-law has dementia but refuses to get help. This breaks my heart, but I'm sharing because families need support during these difficult times. Please send prayers." My hands started shaking as I pressed play. There I was, filmed through what must have been a crack in my kitchen door, standing at my counter at what looked like early morning. In the video, I appeared to be talking to myself, gesturing at empty air, occasionally looking around as if I'd lost something. The audio was muffled, but you could hear me saying things like, "Where did you put it?" And, "I know it was right here yesterday." To anyone watching, it would look exactly like the confused ramblings of an elderly woman losing her grip on reality. But I remembered that morning perfectly. It was 3 weeks ago, when Cassandra had dropped by unexpectedly to check on me while I was on a conference call with my property manager, discussing a potential sale of one of my apartment buildings in San Bernardino. I had been wearing my Bluetooth earpiece, which was nearly invisible in the video, talking to Robert about where he'd filed the inspection reports from the previous month. The empty air I was gesturing at was actually my laptop screen, which was out of frame, showing the building schematics we were reviewing. I scrolled through the comments, each one making my stomach drop further. "Poor lady, this is so sad. My grandmother went through the same thing. That daughter-in-law is a saint for dealing with this. Someone needs to call Adult Protective Services." Hundreds and hundreds of comments from strangers who now believed they knew the most intimate details of my mental health, based on a deliberately misleading 47-second video. But what made my chest tighten with something between fury and heartbreak wasn't the strangers' comments. It was seeing the responses from people who actually knew me, former students' parents who had trusted me with their children's education for decades, now writing things like, "I had no idea she was struggling like this." Church members expressing sympathy for Cassandra having to bear this burden. Even worse, I saw that my own son, Daniel, had liked the post and commented, "Thanks for being so patient with her, babe. We're all doing our best." I closed the app and sat in the quiet of my kitchen for a long time, listening to the grandfather clock in the hallway tick away the minutes. The clock had belonged to Harold's grandmother, and its steady rhythm usually comforted me, but that morning, it sounded like a countdown to something I couldn't name. I wasn't hurt, exactly. I was something deeper than hurt. I was experiencing the particular kind of betrayal that comes when someone you've loved and supported decides to sacrifice your dignity for their own purposes. The house phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Margaret from down the street, her voice gentle and careful in the way people use when they think you might not understand them properly. "Beulah, honey, I just wanted to check in on you after seeing that video. Are you managing okay on your own? Maybe we should talk about getting you some help." I thanked Margaret and told her I was fine, but I could hear the doubt in her voice, the way she was processing everything she'd seen through the lens of Cassandra's narrative. After I hung up, I realized this was just the beginning. Every interaction I had from now on would be filtered through this public declaration of my supposed mental decline. Every forgotten name, every moment of normal confusion that comes with being in your 70s, would be seen as confirmation of Cassandra's story. But here's what Cassandra didn't know when she decided to humiliate me for internet sympathy. She didn't know that the absent-minded old lady she was portraying actually kept meticulous records of everything. She didn't know that I had been quietly helping her family financially for years while watching her post about their self-made success on social media. And she definitely didn't know that the house she was living in, the house where she felt comfortable enough to secretly film me for her viral moment, wasn't actually owned by my son Daniel. I owned it. I had bought it 2 years ago when they were facing foreclosure, then transferred the deed to Daniel to save his pride, with the understanding that they would make monthly payments directly to me. Payments that had been sporadic at best and had stopped entirely 4 months ago, right around the time Cassandra started her lifestyle blog about authentic family moments and finding joy in simple living. That afternoon, I made myself a cup of tea and did something I hadn't done since Harold passed away 6 years ago. I opened the locked filing cabinet in my bedroom closet and pulled out the folder marked Property Records. Inside were the deeds to all 17 of my rental properties, including the house on Maple Street where Daniel, Cassandra, and my 2 grandchildren lived. The house that was featured in the background of most of Cassandra's Instagram posts, with its updated kitchen and the pool that she loved to photograph for her blessed life content. I spread the documents across my dining room table and looked at them properly for the first time in months. The numbers were startling, even to me. Over the years, through careful saving, smart investing, and Harold's insurance policy, I had built a real estate portfolio worth just over $4 million. The monthly rental income alone was more than most people made in a year. I had been living modestly not because I had to, but because I chose to, because I had been raised to believe that showing off wealth was vulgar, and that families should support each other quietly, without fanfare. But looking at these papers while my phone continued to buzz with notifications about my supposed dementia, I realized that my quiet generosity had been mistaken for weakness. My discretion had been interpreted as ignorance. And my love for my family had been repaid with public humiliation designed to make me look like a burden instead of the source of their stability. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of my usual routine of garden work and morning television, I got dressed in my best navy blue suit, the one I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences when I needed to project authority, and drove to the office of Patricia Chen, the property management company that handled most of my rentals. Patricia had been managing my properties for over a decade, and she knew better than anyone how sharp and organized I remained when it came to business matters. "Mrs. Powell," Patricia said when her secretary led me into her office, "this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" I sat down across from her mahogany desk and folded my hands in my lap, the same way I used to when dealing with difficult parents who questioned my classroom management. "Patricia, I need you to help me with something unusual. I need to formally evict my son and his family from the Maple Street property." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. She knew Daniel was my son, had processed his late payments and my instructions to be patient with him multiple times over the past 2 years. Mrs. Powell, are you sure about this? I mean, legally we can do it. They're 4 months behind on payments, but this is your family we're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed her Cassandra's video, which had now been shared over 8,000 times and had generated a local news story about the hidden struggles of dementia families. Patricia watched it with growing concern, but not the kind of concern I expected. "This is you?" she asked. "But Mrs. Powell, you were just here last week reviewing the quarterly reports. You caught that error in the San Bernardino calculations that my own accountant missed. You're sharper than most of my clients half your age." "Exactly," I said.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
"And that's why I need you to start the eviction process immediately. I want everything done by the book, every legal requirement met. They have 30 days' notice, just like any other tenant." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "May I ask what changed your mind about being patient with them?" I thought about how to answer that. The simple truth was that I had spent 2 years watching Cassandra post about their beautiful life, their family adventures, their gratitude for their blessings, while never once acknowledging that those blessings were subsidized by the woman she had just portrayed as mentally incompetent to 500,000 strangers. But the deeper truth was that I was tired of being invisible in my own story, tired of being the family secret that enabled everyone else's success. "Sometimes," I told Patricia, "people need to understand the difference between kindness and foolishness. I've been kind for 2 years. Now they're going to learn what happens when that kindness is mistaken for weakness." Patricia nodded slowly and pulled out a legal pad. "I'll need you to sign some documents, and I'll have to send certified mail to their address. Are you prepared for how they're going to react when they realize you own their house?" The question struck me as funny, though I didn't laugh. "Patricia, they just convinced thousands of people that I can't remember where I put my coffee cup. I don't think they're prepared for anything that's about to happen." We spent the next hour going over the legal requirements for eviction in California. Patricia explained that because they were family and the payments had been informal, the process might be more complicated than a standard rental eviction. But their failure to pay rent for 4 months gave us solid legal grounds. She would send the notice that afternoon, giving them 30 days to either bring their payments current or vacate the property. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not satisfaction, exactly, and certainly not happiness. It was more like relief, the feeling you get when you finally stop carrying something heavy that you didn't realize was weighing you down. For 2 years, I had been silently subsidizing their life while watching Cassandra curate a social media presence that painted their success as entirely self-made. I had been the invisible foundation of their stability, while being treated as an inconvenience to be managed. But after today, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of lemonade, watching the sun set behind the orange trees in my yard. My phone had finally stopped buzzing quite so much, though Cassandra's video continued to gain views and shares. I had received 3 more calls from local news stations wanting to interview me about living with dementia, and 2 calls from Adult Protective Services following up on concerned citizen reports. I answered the social services calls calmly, inviting the caseworker to visit me at her convenience to see for herself that I was managing just fine. I declined the news interviews politely, telling them I preferred to keep my medical matters private. What I didn't tell anyone was that tomorrow, Cassandra's narrative about the poor, confused old lady was going to collide with a reality she never saw coming. The eviction notice would arrive via certified mail in the morning, requiring a signature and creating a legal paper trail that couldn't be explained away or spun for social media sympathy. Daniel would have to choose between continuing to enable his wife's version of events or acknowledging that his supposedly demented mother had been their landlord all along. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about Harold and what he would have said about all this. He had always been better at confrontation than I was, more willing to call out bad behavior directly instead of hoping it would improve on its own. Beulah, he used to say when I would make excuses for people who took advantage of my kindness. Teaching someone a lesson isn't cruel if the lesson needed learning. Tomorrow, Cassandra was going to learn that the woman she had painted as confused and helpless was actually the person who controlled whether her family had a roof over their heads. She was going to discover that her viral moment of supposed compassion had consequences she never anticipated. But tonight I just sat in my garden and enjoyed the quiet, the kind of peace that comes when you finally stop pretending that avoiding conflict is the same thing as keeping the peace. Sometimes I realized the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the natural consequences of their choices. The eviction notice was just the beginning. The certified mail arrived at 9:23 a.m. on Thursday morning, and I know the exact time because I was standing at my kitchen window with my second cup of coffee, watching the postal truck pull up to Daniel's house 3 blocks away. From my vantage point, I could see the mail carrier walking up their front path with the distinctive green card that meant someone had to sign for what they were about to receive. I had been awake since 5, not from anxiety, but from the kind of anticipation that comes when you know you're about to find out what people are really made of. The night before, Cassandra had posted another update about me on her Instagram story. A screenshot of concerned messages from followers asking how they could help support families dealing with dementia. She had responded with crying face emojis and a message about how grateful she was for the outpouring of love, how difficult it was to watch someone you care about lose themselves, and how she was researching care facilities that might be a better fit for my needs. Care facilities. The woman who had been living rent-free in my house for 4 months was publicly discussing putting me in a nursing home while positioning herself as the sacrificial daughter-in-law bearing an impossible burden. I watched through my kitchen window as Cassandra answered the door in her pink silk pajamas, the expensive ones she'd featured in a sponsored post about, quote, morning routines for busy moms. She signed for the envelope with the casual confidence of someone who had never received legal documents before, probably assuming it was another package from one of the brands that sent her free products in exchange for social media mentions. My phone rang 27 minutes later. Mom? Daniel's voice was tight, controlled in the way it got when he was trying not to panic. Can you come over? We need to talk. Of course, honey, I said, setting down my coffee cup and checking my appearance in the hallway mirror. I had chosen my outfit carefully that morning, the same navy suit from the day before, but with my pearl earrings, the ones Harold had given me for our 25th anniversary. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who had her affairs in order. I'll be right there. The walk to their house took me through the neighborhood I had called home for 43 years, past the Hendersons' place where I used to babysit their children, past the corner where Harold and I would stop during our evening walks to chat with whoever was watering their lawn. Normal people living normal lives, most of them probably unaware that their quiet neighbor who brought casseroles when someone was sick actually owned more property than anyone else on the street. When I reached Daniel's front door, I could hear raised voices inside. Not quite arguing, but the kind of intense whispering that happens when people are trying to have a fight without letting the children overhear. I knocked gently, 3 soft taps, and the voices stopped immediately. Daniel opened the door, and I was struck by how much older he looked than he had just a week ago. His hair was uncombed, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he was holding the eviction notice in his left hand, like it might bite him. Behind him, I could see Cassandra pacing in the living room, still in her pajamas but with her phone pressed to her ear. Mom, Daniel said, stepping aside to let me in. What is this? I looked at the paper in his hand, though I knew exactly what it was. Patricia had shown me a copy before it was mailed. Every line of legal text designed to communicate a simple message. Pay what you owe, or leave. It looks like an eviction notice, sweetheart. But why? His voice cracked slightly, the way it used to when he was 12, and couldn't understand why he was in trouble. Why would our landlord do this now? We've been trying to catch up on the rent, I swear. Business has been slow, but we were going to get current as soon as my commission check comes through. I walked past him into the living room, the same living room where I had spent countless Sunday dinners listening to Cassandra complain about their financial stress while simultaneously planning their next vacation. The furniture was expensive, the kind of stuff that shows up in her home decor inspiration posts. The 80-inch television was new since my last visit, and I could see at least 6 packages from various online retailers stacked by the front door. Cassandra ended her phone call and turned to face me, her expression cycling rapidly between confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Beulah, thank God you're here. Someone is trying to kick us out of our house, and we think it might be connected to your situation." My situation? I settled myself into the armchair, where I always sat during family gatherings, the one that faced the window so I could watch my grandchildren play in the backyard. "Your memory issues," Cassandra said gently, using the voice people reserve for children and mental patients. "We think someone might be taking advantage of your confusion. Maybe someone convinced you to sign something you didn't understand?" I looked at Daniel, who was still standing by the door, holding the eviction notice like it might dissolve if he stared at it long enough. "Daniel, honey, who did you think owned this house?" He blinked at me, clearly not understanding why I was asking. "We do. I mean, the bank still has the mortgage, but we've been making payments for 3 years now." "Why? And who do you make those payments to?" "To..." He paused, his forehead creasing. "To you. You told us it would be easier to handle the banking directly, remember? Something about consolidating accounts or refinancing or..." His voice trailed off as he began to realize that his understanding of the situation might be incomplete. Cassandra moved closer to him, her hand reaching for his arm in the protective gesture she used in her couple's photos. "Daniel, you're confusing her. She's not following the conversation." But Daniel was looking at me now with the expression of someone who was beginning to connect dots he had never thought to connect before. "Mom, when you said you would help us with the banking, what exactly did you mean?" I opened my purse and pulled out a folder I had prepared that morning. Inside were copies of the original deed, the transfer papers, and 3 years of payment records showing every late fee I had waived, every month I had accepted partial payment, every time I had chosen family peace over business sense. I handed the folder to Daniel and watched his face change as he flipped through the documents. "You own our house," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I bought it when you were 3 months behind on your mortgage and facing foreclosure," I confirmed. "The bank was going to take it, so I paid off your loan and transferred the deed to your name. You were supposed to make monthly payments to me instead of the bank, payments that would build equity for your family while helping me maintain my rental income." Cassandra snatched the folder from Daniel's hands, her eyes scanning the papers with growing alarm. "This is impossible. We would have known. Someone would have told us." "I told you," I said calmly. "Daniel, do you remember the conversation we had in this kitchen 3 years ago when you were crying because you thought you were going to lose your house? I said I would help you find a solution, and you said you trusted me to handle the details." Daniel sank onto the couch, still staring at the eviction notice. "But you said you made it sound like you were just helping us organize our finances. You never said you were buying our house. Would it have mattered? You were desperate, and I had the means to help. I thought it would be a good arrangement for everyone. You would get to keep your home, build equity, and have more manageable payments. I would have a reliable investment with family I trusted." Cassandra was flipping through the payment records now, her face growing paler with each page. "These amounts we've been paying below market rate this whole time?" "Considerably below," I admitted. "The house is worth about $400,000 now. Market rent would be around $3,000 a month. You've been paying me $1,800, and even that has been sporadic." The silence that followed was the kind that comes when people realize their entire understanding of their life has been wrong. Daniel was processing the fact that his mother had essentially given his family a $200,000 gift over 3 years, while Cassandra was calculating how much money they had saved and how much they now owed. "So when you posted that video of me," I continued, addressing Cassandra directly, "showing me to 500,000 people as a confused old woman who can't manage her own affairs, you were talking about your landlord, the person who has been subsidizing your lifestyle while you've been posting about your self-made success." Cassandra's mouth opened and closed several times before she found words. "That video, I was trying to help. People in the comments were offering resources, support groups, advice about care options. I thought if we could get you the right kind of help." "Help with what, exactly?" "With your memory problems, with your confusion. Daniel told me you've been having episodes, talking to people who aren't there, losing track of things." I turned to look at my son, who was now staring at his hands. Daniel, when did you tell her I was having memory problems? He didn't answer immediately, but Cassandra filled the silence. He said you've been calling him at weird hours, asking about things that already happened, repeating yourself in conversations. And then that morning when I saw you in your kitchen, talking to empty air, getting upset about missing papers. I was on a business call, I said quietly, with my property manager. We were discussing the sale of one of my rental buildings. I was wearing a Bluetooth earpiece. Daniel's head snapped up. Your rental buildings? I reached into my purse again and pulled out a second folder, this one containing a summary of my real estate portfolio. I had debated whether to show them everything, but after spending 3 days watching strangers on the internet discuss my mental competency, I decided they deserved to understand exactly how competent I actually was. 17 properties, I said, handing Daniel the folder. Apartment buildings, single-family homes, a small commercial plaza, all paid for in cash over the past 30 years. The rental income alone is more than most people make in a year. Cassandra grabbed the folder from Daniel before he could open it, her eyes scanning the property list with growing disbelief. This can't be right. You live in that tiny house, you drive a 15-year-old car, you shop at thrift stores. I live modestly because I choose to, not because I have to. Harold and I learned early that showing off wealth makes you a target, and that the best security comes from people underestimating what you're capable of. Daniel was staring at me like I was a stranger. Mom, if you have all this money, all these properties, why didn't you ever tell us? Why did you let us struggle? You weren't struggling as much as you thought you were, I pointed out. I bought your house, cut your rent in half, and never once asked you to pay on time. When you needed a new car, I co-signed the loan. When Cassandra wanted to start her blog, I bought her the camera equipment for Christmas. I've been helping you all along, just quietly. Cassandra was pacing again, her silk pajamas making swishing sounds as she moved. But that video, I didn't know any of this. If you had known I was wealthy, you wouldn't have filmed me secretly in my own kitchen and posted it online with a story about my mental decline? She stopped pacing and looked at me directly for the first time since I had arrived. I was worried about you. You seemed confused, lost. I thought documenting it might help doctors understand what was happening. Without my permission. Without asking me what I was doing or who I was talking to. You saw an opportunity to create content that would get sympathy and engagement, and you took it. Daniel stood up suddenly, the folder scattering papers across the coffee table. Mom, this is insane. You're talking like Cassandra is some kind of villain, but she's been taking care of you, checking on you, including you in family events. Including me? I laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. Daniel, when was the last time your wife spoke to me about anything other than my supposed health problems? When was the last time she asked my opinion about something that mattered, or treated me like someone whose thoughts might be worth hearing? Cassandra's face flushed red. That's not fair. I've always been respectful to you. You've been polite to me, I corrected. The way you're polite to a waitress or a cashier. Someone you need to get along with but don't particularly value. But respect? Respect would have been asking me before filming me. Respect would have been considering that there might be an explanation for what you saw before deciding I was mentally incompetent. Respect would have been recognizing that the woman who raised the man you married might have more depth than you gave her credit for. The room fell quiet, except for the sound of the air conditioning cycling on and the distant noise of children playing in a neighbor's yard. Daniel was looking back and forth between his mother and his wife like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Finally, Cassandra broke the silence. What do you want from us? I want you to bring your rent current, I said simply. 4 months at $1,800 per month plus late fees as specified in our agreement. That's $8,200. We don't have $8,000, Daniel said quietly. Then I want you to move out by the date specified in the eviction notice, 30 days from today. Cassandra's phone buzzed with a notification, and she glanced at it automatically. Her face went even paler. The video is trending on TikTok now. It's been shared over 20,000 times. I stood up, smoothing my skirt and collecting my purse. Then you'd better hope those 20,000 people don't find out that the confused old lady they're feeling sorry for is actually your landlord. That might change the narrative somewhat. Mom, wait, Daniel called as I headed toward the door. We can figure this out. Family doesn't throw family out on the street. I paused with my hand on the doorknob and turned back to face him. You're absolutely right, Daniel. Family doesn't throw family out on the street. Family also doesn't film family members without permission and post videos suggesting they're mentally incompetent. Family doesn't take financial help for years while publicly pretending to be self-made. And family definitely doesn't discuss putting someone in a nursing home on social media while living in that person's house. Daniel's shoulders sagged. She didn't know, Mom. About the house, about the money, about any of it. She didn't know because she never asked. She saw what she wanted to see, believed what was convenient for her to believe, and never once considered that her assumptions might be wrong. That's not an accident, Daniel. That's a choice. I opened the door and stepped out into the bright morning sunlight, leaving behind the sound of Cassandra's voice rising in what sounded like the beginning of an argument with Daniel. As I walked back toward my house, I could hear fragments of their conversation drifting through the open windows. Words like, "How could you not tell me?" and "Your mother has been playing games with us," and "What are we going to do now?" What they were going to do now was learn something that should have been obvious from the beginning. That kindness extended quietly over years is still kindness. That help given without fanfare is still help. And that the person you dismiss as incompetent might be the person keeping your world afloat. When I reached my house, I found my neighbor Margaret waiting on my front porch with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. "Beulah, honey, I've been thinking about that video, and something about it just doesn't sit right with me. You've always been sharp as a tack. I wanted to ask you directly, are you really having memory problems?" I invited Margaret inside and put on a pot of coffee, then sat down at my kitchen table with someone who had known me for over 20 years. "Margaret, do I seem confused to you?" She studied my face carefully, the way a good friend does when they're trying to solve a puzzle. "No," she said finally. "You seem tired, maybe a little sad, but not confused." "Not at all." "Then trust your instincts," I said, handing her a cup of coffee in the china cup she always preferred. "People see what they expect to see, and sometimes what they want to see. My daughter-in-law expected to see a declining old woman, so that's what she filmed. But you know me well enough to look deeper." Margaret nodded slowly. "That girl never did seem to really listen when you talked. Always looked like she was waiting for her turn to speak, rather than actually hearing what you were saying." "Exactly. And now she's paying the price for not paying attention." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the birds at the feeder outside my kitchen window. Margaret had been my friend long enough to know when I needed to talk and when I needed quiet, and today I needed both. Finally, she asked, "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "they learn what it costs to underestimate someone. And I learn whether my son values truth and accountability more than he values keeping his wife happy." Margaret raised her eyebrows. "And if he chooses keeping his wife happy?" I looked out at my garden, where the tomatoes were just beginning to ripen, and the marigolds were blooming in bright orange clusters that Harold would have loved. Then I learned something important about who my son has become, and I make decisions based on that information. As Margaret left, promising to stop by again soon, I realized that for the first time in years I felt completely awake. Not just alert, but genuinely alive in a way that had nothing to do with proving my mental competency and everything to do with finally being seen for who I actually was. The eviction notice had 30 days to run its course, but the real deadline was much shorter. Daniel and Cassandra had about a week to decide who they wanted to be. People who could acknowledge their mistakes and make amends, or people who would double down on their version of events, even when confronted with evidence of their errors. Either way, I would be fine. After all, I had 17 other properties and a lifetime of experience dealing with tenants who thought they could take advantage of a little old lady who surely didn't understand how the world really worked. Some lessons I was learning are too important to teach gently. The next morning, I woke up to find 17 missed calls on my phone and a news van parked across the street from my house. Through my bedroom window, I could see a young woman in a bright blue blazer standing on the sidewalk, speaking into a microphone while gesturing toward my front door. Behind her, a cameraman was setting up equipment on my neighbor's lawn. I made my coffee and toast as usual, then sat at my kitchen table to listen to my voicemails while watching the news crew through my window. The first few messages were from numbers I didn't recognize. Reporters from various local stations asking for interviews about, quote, living with dementia in today's digital age. But the fourth message made me set down my coffee cup. Mrs. Powell, this is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We've received some conflicting information about the viral video featuring you, and we'd like to get your side of the story. Specifically, we've been told that you may not actually have dementia, and that there might be more to this story than initially reported. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I deleted the message and moved on to the next one, which was from my property manager, Patricia. Beulah, I don't know what's happening over there, but I've had 3 reporters call my office asking about your real estate holdings and your mental competency. I haven't told them anything, but you need to know that this is getting attention beyond just social media now. The 8th message was from Daniel, his voice strained and exhausted. Mom, please call me back. Cassandra's lawyer says we might have options to fight the eviction, but we need to talk first. Also, there are reporters calling us too. And Cassandra is freaking out. Please call me. I finished listening to the messages while making a mental list of phone calls I needed to return. First, I called Patricia to discuss how to handle media inquiries about my business affairs. Then I called my own attorney, Robert Kingsley, a man I had worked with for over a decade on various property transactions and estate planning matters. Beulah, Robert said when his secretary put me through, I've been watching the news and I have to ask, are you actually experiencing cognitive decline, or is this some kind of misunderstanding? Robert, you've handled my legal affairs for 10 years. Do I seem cognitively impaired to you? He laughed, but not unkindly. You caught 3 errors in my contract review last month and suggested improvements to my filing system. I'd say your cognitive abilities are just fine. What exactly is going on? I explained the situation from the beginning. Cassandra's video, the public narrative about my supposed dementia, the eviction notice, and the media attention that was now spiraling beyond anything I had anticipated. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. This is potentially a significant defamation issue, he said when I finished. If your daughter-in-law knowingly posted misleading information about your mental health that has damaged your reputation, you may have grounds for a lawsuit. But first, we need to address the immediate situation with the media. What do you recommend? I think it's time for you to tell your own story. This narrative has gotten away from everyone involved, and the longer you stay silent, the more people will fill in the blanks with assumptions. Are you prepared to go public with the truth about your financial situation and your family dynamics? I looked out my kitchen window, where the news crew was now being joined by a second van from a different station. My quiet neighborhood street was beginning to look like the scene of a major story, all because my daughter-in-law had decided to film me without permission and share it with the world. Yes, I said. I think it's time people knew exactly who they've been feeling sorry for. Robert advised me to prepare a written statement and suggested we hold a press conference rather than giving individual interviews. Control the narrative, he said. Tell your story once, completely, and let them report on that rather than letting them build a story from pieces and speculation. After hanging up with Robert, I spent the morning drafting a statement that laid out the facts clearly and completely. I included details about my real estate portfolio, my business relationship with Daniel and Cassandra, the circumstances under which the viral video was filmed, and my current mental and physical health status. I also included copies of recent medical records, business correspondence, and financial documents that would substantiate my claims. Around noon, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Daniel standing on my porch, looking haggard and nervous. Behind him, parked on the street, I could see Cassandra sitting in their car with the windows up, apparently unwilling to face the reporters, who were now questioning her version of events. Mom, Daniel said when I opened the door, we need to talk. Can I come in? I led him to the living room, away from the kitchen window where the news crews might be able to see us. Daniel sat on the edge of my sofa, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, and for a moment he looked exactly like the little boy who used to confess his playground mistakes to me after school. The reporters are asking us questions we can't answer, he said. They want to know about your business dealings, about whether we knew you owned the house, about the video. Cassandra is convinced that someone is trying to make her look bad on purpose. Someone is making her look bad, I agreed. She's making herself look bad by sticking to a story that isn't true. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years when he was overwhelmed by problems he couldn't solve. Mom, I need you to help me understand something. If you have all this money, all these properties, why did you let us think we were struggling? Why didn't you just tell us you could help more than you were helping? I was helping as much as I could without taking away your sense of accomplishment and independence. When I bought your house, you were facing foreclosure. You were desperate and ashamed. I thought giving you affordable housing while letting you believe you were managing your own finances would preserve your dignity. But we weren't managing our own finances. We were living off your charity and not even knowing it. You were living with my support, just like children live with their parents' support. The difference is that I tried to structure it in a way that would help you build toward independence rather than dependence. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. Cassandra says you're trying to punish us for the video. She thinks you planned all this, that you've been waiting for an excuse to kick us out. Daniel, I've been patient with late rent payments for months. If I wanted to evict you, I had legal grounds long before that video appeared. The video just made me realize that my patience was being interpreted as weakness, and my generosity was being taken for granted. So what do you want from us? What would it take for you to drop the eviction? I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the boy I had raised to value honesty and accountability. I want Cassandra to publicly acknowledge that the video was misleading. I want her to admit that she filmed me without permission, that she didn't verify her assumptions about my mental health, and that she misrepresented the situation to her followers. Daniel's shoulders sagged. She'll never do that. It would destroy her credibility as an influencer. She's built her whole brand around being authentic and trustworthy. Then she should have been authentic and trustworthy instead of building her brand on lies about her mother-in-law's mental competency. Mom, please. She made a mistake. She was worried about you and she thought she was helping. Can't you find some way to forgive this? I walked to the window and looked out at the reporters, who were now interviewing neighbors about their observations of my behavior over the years. Margaret was speaking to one journalist, and from her animated gestures, I could tell she was defending my mental sharpness. Mrs. Chen, from 2 houses down, was nodding emphatically while talking to another reporter, probably describing the many conversations we'd had about gardening and local politics. Daniel, I said without turning around, do you know what those reporters are learning about me right now? What? They're learning that I've been an active, engaged member of this community for over 40 years, that I've served on the school board, organized charity drives, tutored struggling students, and maintained friendships with people who value my opinions and insights. They're discovering that the woman your wife portrayed as confused and declining is actually someone who has been quietly contributing to this neighborhood's stability and growth for decades. I turned back to face him. What they're not learning is why my own family believed I was incompetent without ever questioning that assumption. They're not learning why my son didn't know that his mother owned multiple properties, or why my daughter-in-law felt comfortable filming me secretly and sharing that footage with strangers. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing to my bookshelf and back. What do you want me to say, Mom, that we took you for granted? That we should have paid more attention? Fine, I'm saying it. We screwed up. But destroying our lives isn't going to fix anything. I'm not destroying your lives, Daniel. I'm removing myself as the safety net that was enabling you to make poor decisions without consequences. There's a difference. A safety net we didn't even know existed. Exactly. You were living beyond your means, making financial choices based on the assumption that somehow everything would work out, never questioning where your stability was actually coming from. Now you know. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Robert, letting me know that he had scheduled a press conference for 4 p.m. in his office, and that he'd sent advance notice to all the major local news outlets. The message also mentioned that Channel 7 had reached out about Cassandra's response to the new information that was emerging. Daniel, I said, putting my phone back in my purse, I'm holding a press conference this afternoon to set the record straight about my mental health and my relationship with your family. You and Cassandra need to decide how you want to respond to that." His face went pale. "What are you going to say?" "I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. About the video, about the house, about the financial support I've provided your family, and about my actual mental and physical condition. Mom, if you do that, it'll ruin Cassandra's reputation completely. She'll lose all her followers, her sponsorship deals, everything she's worked for. She built her reputation on a foundation of lies about my competency. If telling the truth destroys that reputation, then it wasn't worth having in the first place." Daniel sat back down heavily, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, Daniel. Only Cassandra can fix it, by taking responsibility for what she did and making amends. But based on our conversation yesterday, and your visit today, it seems like she's more interested in protecting her image than in acknowledging her mistakes. She's scared, Mom. She's worked so hard to build her following, and now it's all falling apart. She should have thought about that before she decided to use my supposed mental decline as content for her social media accounts." I walked Daniel to the door, noticing that more neighbors had come out of their houses to watch the news crews. Several of them waved at me, and Mrs. Patterson from the corner house called out, "We're behind you, Beulah." I waved back, grateful for the support, but also aware that this situation was spiraling far beyond what any of us had expected. As Daniel walked back to his car, I could see Cassandra watching us through the passenger window. Even from a distance, her body language radiated anger and defiance. She wasn't looking like someone who was preparing to take accountability for her actions. She was looking like someone who was preparing for a fight. I spent the afternoon reviewing my statement with Robert and preparing for questions that the reporters might ask. We decided to limit the press conference to 15 minutes, with a focus on clarifying the facts rather than engaging in personal attacks on Cassandra. The goal was to restore my reputation while leaving room for my family to salvage their situation if they chose to handle it appropriately. At 3:45 p.m., I arrived at Robert's office building downtown, where a crowd of reporters and camera crews had already gathered in the small conference room he had reserved. I recognized some faces from the morning news shows, but there were also journalists I didn't recognize, suggesting that the story had attracted attention beyond just local media. Robert introduced me briefly, emphasizing my long history as a respected community member and successful businesswoman. Then I took the podium and began reading my prepared statement. My name is Beulah Powell. I am 73 years old, and contrary to recent reports, I do not have dementia or any other form of cognitive impairment. The viral video that has generated so much concern and discussion was filmed without my knowledge or consent while I was conducting a business call about my real estate investments. I paused to let that sink in, watching as several reporters made notes and cameras focused more closely on my face. I have been managing a portfolio of 17 rental properties for over 30 years. I am mentally competent, financially independent, and actively involved in the management of my business affairs. The suggestion that I am confused or declining is not only false but defamatory. I continued reading, explaining the circumstances of the video, my relationship with Daniel and Cassandra, and the facts about their housing situation. I provided documentation of my business dealings, medical records confirming my mental competency, and testimony from my attorney, accountant, and physician. When I finished the prepared statement, Robert opened the floor to questions. The first reporter asked about my decision to evict my son's family, and I explained that the eviction was based solely on non-payment of rent, not retaliation for the video. The second question came from a journalist I recognized from Channel 7. Mrs. Powell, how do you respond to suggestions that you've been hiding your wealth from your family and that this situation could have been avoided with better communication? I have never hidden my wealth from anyone who had a legitimate need to know about it. My financial affairs are private, just as anyone else's would be. However, I have consistently supported my family, both emotionally and financially. The idea that I owe them detailed disclosure of my business holdings is frankly absurd. A third reporter asked, "What would you like to see happen now? What resolution are you hoping for?" I looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting live. I would like my daughter-in-law to acknowledge that she made serious errors in judgment when she filmed me without permission and shared misleading information about my mental health. I would like my family to recognize that their assumptions about my capabilities and circumstances were wrong, and to take responsibility for the consequences of those assumptions. The questions continued for several more minutes, but they became increasingly repetitive. When Robert called an end to the conference, I felt a sense of relief mixed with apprehension. I had told my story, clearly and completely, but I knew that the real test would be how Daniel and Cassandra responded. As we left the building, Robert walked me to my car while reporters continued to call out questions. "How do you think that went?" I asked. "I think you presented yourself exactly as you are. A competent, articulate woman who has been significantly wronged by people who should have known better. The question now is whether your family can rise to the occasion or whether they'll try to double down on their version of events." We didn't have to wait long for an answer. By the time I got home, Cassandra had already posted a new video on her Instagram account. In it, she was crying while talking about being, quote, attacked by people who don't understand the complexities of family caregiving. She claimed that she had been trying to help and that my press conference was proof that I was lashing out due to my condition. The video had been posted only an hour earlier, but it already had thousands of comments, most of them supportive of Cassandra. Her followers were calling me ungrateful and cruel, and several suggested that my behavior at the press conference actually proved that I was mentally unstable. But buried in the comments, I also saw signs that some people were beginning to ask questions. "Wait, she owns 17 properties?" One commenter wrote. "This doesn't add up." Another said, "If she's really that successful in business, maybe the family dynamics are more complicated than we thought." As the evening wore on, I watched the news coverage of my press conference on 3 different channels. Each station presented the story slightly differently, but the basic facts were consistent. I was not mentally impaired, I was financially independent, and the viral video had been misleading. More importantly, the coverage included interviews with my neighbors and business associates, all of whom vouched for my mental acuity and described me as someone they had always known to be sharp, reliable, and engaged. Margaret gave a particularly strong interview, describing our regular conversations about current events and her observations of my daily activities. By bedtime, I realized that the narrative was beginning to shift. The story was no longer just about a sad old lady with dementia. It was becoming a story about assumptions, family dynamics, and the dangers of social media misinformation. But the real test would come tomorrow, when Daniel and Cassandra had to decide whether to continue fighting a losing battle or to finally acknowledge the truth about what had happened and take responsibility for their roles in it. Either way, I had done what I needed to do. I had reclaimed my story, restored my reputation, and shown the world exactly who Beulah Powell really was. Whatever happened next would be up to them. The morning after my press conference, I woke up to silence. No reporters were camped outside my house, no news vans lined the street, and my phone wasn't buzzing with interview requests. The sudden quiet felt strange after 3 days of constant media attention, but it also felt like an exhale, like the world was taking a moment to process what had been revealed. I made my coffee and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop to see how the story was being covered online. The major news websites had picked up the press conference footage, and the headlines were telling a very different story than they had been 3 days earlier. "Wealthy businesswoman fights back against dementia hoax," read one. "Family dynamics gone wrong when social media assumptions backfire," said another. But what struck me most was reading the comment sections, where thousands of people were now discussing not just my situation, but broader questions about how we treat elderly family members, how social media can distort reality, and what happens when our assumptions about people turn out to be completely wrong. One comment in particular stayed with me. This story made me realize I've been treating my own mother like she's fragile and confused, just because she's in her 70s. Maybe I should actually listen to what she's saying, instead of assuming I know what's best for her. At 8:30, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Daniel standing alone on my porch, holding what looked like a manila envelope. His shoulders were slumped in defeat, and he kept glancing back at the street as if he was expecting someone to follow him. "Morning, Mom," he said when I opened the door. His voice was hoarse, like he had been talking or arguing for hours. "Can we sit down? I have something I need to show you." I led him to the living room, and he sat heavily in the same spot he had occupied during our previous conversations. But this time, something was different about his demeanor. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by something that looked like resignation mixed with shame. Cassandra left, he said without preamble. She took the kids to her mother's place in Phoenix yesterday evening, right after your press conference aired. She said she can't handle the backlash, that people are calling her a liar and a fraud, and that she needs time to figure out how to rebuild her reputation. I wasn't surprised, but I was sorry to hear it, particularly for my grandchildren. And you? Are you going with her? Daniel shook his head. She didn't ask me to come. Said I need to handle my mother before we can work on our marriage. He laughed bitterly. Handle you? Like you're some kind of problem to be managed, instead of the person who's been keeping our lives together. He handed me the manila envelope. I found this in Cassandra's desk when I was packing her things. I think you should see it. Inside the envelope were printed copies of social media posts, emails, and text message screenshots that painted a very different picture of Cassandra's intentions than I had understood. The first document was a screenshot of a conversation between Cassandra and someone named Michelle, apparently another lifestyle blogger. Girl, I need content that really hits different, Cassandra had written. The family stuff is getting good engagement, but I need something that goes viral. Something that makes people feel like they have to share it. Michelle's response was equally calculating. Anything with elderly people and health issues does numbers. Super shareable. Have you thought about documenting your MIL's decline? People eat that stuff up, especially if you position yourself as the long-suffering caregiver. Cassandra's reply made my stomach turn. OMG, yes. She does weird stuff all the time that I could probably film. And she's always been kind of cold to me anyway, so it's not like I owe her anything. The conversation continued for several more exchanges, with Michelle offering advice on how to film authentic moments without seeming exploitative, and Cassandra expressing excitement about the potential for sponsorship deals from companies that marketed to families dealing with elder care issues. I set down the first document and picked up the second one, which was a draft email that Cassandra had apparently written to a talent agency that specialized in representing social media influencers. In the email, she described herself as a family lifestyle content creator specializing in multi-generational caregiving stories, and outlined her plans to, quote, document the challenges and rewards of caring for an aging family member with cognitive decline. The email was dated 2 weeks before she filmed the video that started all of this. She planned it, Daniel said quietly, watching my face as I read. The whole thing was calculated to go viral. She had been looking for an opportunity to film you for weeks, waiting for a moment when you might look confused or disoriented. I picked up the third document, which was a printed screenshot of another conversation, this one between Cassandra and her sister. I finally got good footage of Daniel's mom acting weird, Cassandra had written. She was talking to herself and looking all confused. Posted it an hour ago, and it's already getting crazy engagement. This could be exactly what I need to break into the big leagues. Her sister had responded with multiple fire emojis and the comment, "Get that bag, sis. Might as well make money off dealing with difficult in-laws." I set the papers down on my coffee table and looked at my son, who was staring at his hands with an expression of profound regret. "Daniel, did you know about any of this?" "No," he said immediately. "I swear to you, Mom, I had no idea she was planning anything like this. When she showed me the video before posting it, she said she was worried about you and thought documenting your behavior might help us get you the care you needed. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. But you did think I was having cognitive problems." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I thought you were getting a little forgetful, maybe less sharp than you used to be. But honestly, I think that was because Cassandra kept pointing out things and making me notice them in a different way. She would say things like, 'Did you hear how your mom repeated that story?' Or, 'She seemed confused about what day it was.' And once she started saying those things, I started seeing them too, even when they probably weren't really there." "Gaslighting," I said quietly. "She was gaslighting both of us, making you doubt your own perceptions of me while making me doubt my own competency. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have trusted my own judgment instead of letting her shape how I saw you. I should have spent more time with you, really talking to you, instead of just accepting her version of who you were becoming. I reached across the coffee table and took his hand, the way I used to when he was small and needed comfort after making a mistake. Daniel, people we trust have tremendous power to influence how we see the world. Cassandra used that trust to manipulate both of us, and that's not your fault. But I should have known better. I should have remembered that you raised me to think for myself, to question things that don't make sense. You're remembering now. That's what matters. Daniel squeezed my hand and then pulled out his phone. There's something else I need to show you. Cassandra posted another video last night after she got to Phoenix. I think you should see it before you decide what you want to do next. He pulled up Cassandra's Instagram account and handed me the phone. The latest video showed her sitting in what looked like a hotel room, her eyes red from crying but her makeup carefully applied. The caption read, "Speaking my truth after 24 hours of attacks." In the video, Cassandra spoke directly to the camera with the kind of practiced sincerity that influencers perfect over time. I want to address what happened yesterday because there's been a lot of misinformation spread about me and my family. Yes, I posted a video of my mother-in-law that I now realize was taken out of context. But I want people to understand that my intentions were pure. I was genuinely concerned about her well-being, and I thought sharing our family's struggles might help other people going through similar situations. She paused for a dramatic breath. What wasn't mentioned in yesterday's press conference was that my husband and I have been dealing with erratic behavior from his mother for months. Phone calls at odd hours, confusion about conversations we'd already had, difficulty managing her finances. When I saw her that morning, talking to people who weren't there, I was scared. I was scared for her safety and scared for my children's safety. The video continued with Cassandra painting herself as a concerned daughter-in-law who had been attacked by someone with documented mental health issues and who was now afraid for her family's safety because I had quote, to try to destroy their lives. My husband and I are now homeless, she concluded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Our children have been uprooted from their schools and their friends because my mother-in-law decided to punish us for trying to help her. I'm sharing this because people deserve to know the whole truth, not just the version that makes me look like the villain. The video had been posted 8 hours earlier and already had over 50,000 views and thousands of comments. I scrolled through them quickly, noting that the sentiment was mixed. Some people were supporting Cassandra's version of events, but others were pointing out inconsistencies in her story and asking why she hadn't mentioned the business call explanation that I had provided. I handed the phone back to Daniel. What do you think about what she said? Daniel was quiet for a moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he should say. Finally, he spoke. I think she's lying. Not about everything, but about the important parts. You never called us at odd hours. You never seemed confused about conversations. And she knows damn well that you weren't talking to people who weren't there that morning, because I told her you were probably on a business call. You told her that? When she first showed me the video, I said it looked like you might be on the phone with someone. She said she had checked and you weren't holding a phone, so you must have been talking to yourself. I didn't think to ask about Bluetooth earpieces or anything like that. I just accepted her explanation because it seemed to fit with the other concerns she had been raising. I stood up and walked to my front window, looking out at the quiet street where I had lived peacefully for so many years before all this started. Daniel, what do you want to happen now? What outcome would feel right to you? I want Cassandra to take down both videos and post a real apology, one that acknowledges what she actually did and why it was wrong. I want her to stop painting you as mentally unstable and admit that she filmed you without permission for content creation purposes. And I want to figure out how to make things right between us, even if it means starting over completely. And if she won't do that? Daniel joined me at the window, standing close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face. Then I guess I have to decide whether I want to be married to someone who would do this to my mother and then lie about it publicly, rather than taking responsibility for her mistakes. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed Robert's office number. Beulah, he said when I answered. I've been monitoring the social media response to your daughter-in-law's latest video, and I think we need to discuss next steps. She's making specific claims about your mental health and behavior that could constitute continued defamation, especially given that we've already provided evidence to the contrary. What are you recommending? I think it's time to consider legal action, not just to protect your reputation, but to establish a clear public record of what actually happened. Her latest video shows that she has no intention of backing down or taking responsibility, which means this situation will continue to escalate until someone forces it to stop. I looked at Daniel, who could hear Robert's voice through the phone. He nodded slowly, his expression grim but resolute. Mom, if that's what it takes to make this right, I'll support you completely. I'll even testify about the conversations I had with Cassandra and the documents I found. After hanging up with Robert, Daniel and I spent the rest of the morning going through more of the evidence he had discovered in Cassandra's belongings. There were email drafts to potential sponsors, screenshots of analytics showing the engagement rates on her family drama content, and even a document that appeared to be a business plan for expanding her influence in the elder care advocacy space. The picture that emerged was of someone who had seen my supposed decline not as a family crisis to be handled with compassion, but as a content opportunity to be exploited for personal gain. Every interaction she had had with me over the past months had apparently been viewed through the lens of potential social media material. Daniel, I said as we finished reviewing the last document, I need you to understand something. If I proceed with legal action against Cassandra, it's going to get ugly. She's going to escalate her attacks, probably make even more serious accusations about my mental health and our family dynamics. Are you prepared for that? Mom, she's already making those accusations. At least if we fight back legally, we can force her to provide evidence for her claims, which she can't do because they're not true. I called Robert back and asked him to begin preparing a defamation lawsuit against Cassandra. I also asked him to send a cease and desist letter demanding that she remove both videos and stop making public statements about my mental health. That afternoon, Daniel helped me draft a response to Cassandra's latest video. Rather than posting it on social media, we decided to release it as a formal statement through Robert's office. The statement included copies of the documents Daniel had found, testimony from my medical providers confirming my mental competency, and a detailed timeline showing how Cassandra's story had changed and evolved as more facts came to light. We also included a statement from Daniel himself, acknowledging his role in enabling Cassandra's behavior and publicly supporting my version of events. I was manipulated into doubting my own mother's competency by someone I trusted, he wrote. I failed to protect her from exploitation, and I am deeply ashamed of that failure. My mother deserves better from her family, and I am committed to making amends for my part in this situation. The statement was picked up by multiple news outlets within hours of its release. More importantly, it seemed to shift public opinion decisively in my favor. The combination of documentary evidence and Daniel's corroboration made it very difficult for anyone to continue believing Cassandra's version of events. By evening, several major news organizations had reached out for follow-up interviews, and I found myself in the strange position of being considered a hero for standing up against social media manipulation and elder exploitation. It wasn't a role I had ever wanted or expected to play, but I was grateful that my experience might prevent other families from going through something similar. 3 days later, I received a phone call from Cassandra. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name on my caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. Beulah, she said, her voice smaller and less confident than I had ever heard it. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. My lawyer says your defamation case is really strong. He says I could lose everything if this goes to trial, and that the best thing I can do is settle and issue a public apology. Your lawyer is giving you good advice. There was a long pause. I never meant for things to go this far. I know you probably don't believe that, but I really didn't. I just wanted to create content that would help my career, and I thought filming you wouldn't hurt anyone because you would never see it. But I did see it, Cassandra. And so did 500,000 other people, all of whom now have a completely false impression of my mental capabilities. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm ready to post an apology and take down the videos, but I need something from you in return. What's that? I need you to drop the eviction. Daniel and I are trying to work things out, and the kids need stability. They've already been through enough upheaval because of this mess. I was quiet for a moment, considering her request. The truth was, I had never wanted to evict my own family. I had wanted them to understand the consequences of their actions, and to take responsibility for the harm they had caused. If Cassandra was genuinely prepared to make amends, then maybe there was a path forward that didn't involve destroying their housing situation. Here's what I'm willing to do, I said finally. If you post a complete and honest apology that acknowledges exactly what you did wrong, and if you and Daniel agree to family counseling to work on the communication issues that led to this situation, I'll withdraw the eviction notice. But you'll need to bring your rent current and agree to a formal lease agreement that doesn't rely on family goodwill. What kind of apology are you looking for? One that tells the truth, that you filmed me without permission, that you misrepresented what you saw, that you planned the video as content creation rather than genuine concern for my health, and that you continued to make false statements about my mental competency, even after being provided with evidence to the contrary. Cassandra was quiet for a long time. That's going to kill my credibility as an influencer. Your credibility as an influencer was built on lies about your mother-in-law's mental health. If telling the truth destroys that credibility, then maybe you need to find a new career path. 2 days later, Cassandra posted a video that was unlike anything she had ever shared before. She looked directly into the camera without filters or dramatic lighting, and spoke in a flat, tired voice that carried none of her usual performance energy. I need to apologize to my mother-in-law, Beulah Powell, and to everyone who was misled by the content I posted about her. The video I shared showing her appearing confused was taken without her knowledge or consent while she was conducting a business call. I knew there might be an innocent explanation for what I was seeing, but I chose not to investigate because I thought the content would be good for my social media engagement. She continued for nearly 10 minutes, addressing each of the false claims she had made and acknowledging the evidence that contradicted her narrative. She admitted to planning the video as content creation, to ignoring alternative explanations for my behavior, and to continuing to make false statements even after learning the truth. Mrs. Powell is not mentally impaired, she concluded. She is a successful businesswoman who has been generous and supportive to our family in ways I never publicly acknowledged. I violated her privacy, damaged her reputation, and caused tremendous pain to someone who deserved much better treatment from me. I am deeply sorry for my actions, and I am committed to making amends however I can. The video received mixed reactions, with some people praising her for taking accountability, while others criticized her for the damage she had already done. But more importantly, it cleared my name publicly and created a record that would prevent future speculation about my mental health. Daniel moved back into the house on Maple Street 2 weeks later, alone. He and Cassandra were attending online counseling sessions to work on their relationship, but she remained in Phoenix while they figured out whether their marriage could survive what had happened. The formal lease agreement we signed was much more structured than our previous arrangement, with clear payment schedules, late fees, and responsibilities outlined for both parties. Daniel had found a new job with a steady salary that would allow him to make the payments reliably, and he seemed relieved to have a clear understanding of our business relationship. 6 months later, I was working in my garden when my phone buzzed with a notification that someone had tagged me in a social media post. I almost ignored it since I had grown weary of social media attention, but something made me look. It was a post from a woman named Sarah who lived in Oregon, and it included a photo of her sitting with an elderly woman at what looked like a kitchen table covered with financial documents. 6 months ago, I saw the story about Beulah Powell and realized I had been making the same assumptions about my own mother that almost destroyed Mrs. Powell's relationship with her family. Today, I learned that my supposedly confused mom has been managing a stock portfolio worth over $300,000 and has been too polite to tell me that my financial advice was completely wrong. Thank you, Beulah Powell, for teaching me to actually listen to the people I love instead of assuming I know what's best for them. The post had been shared hundreds of times, with other people commenting about similar realizations they had had about their own elderly family members. I scrolled through comment after comment, from people who had started actually talking to their aging parents instead of talking about them, who had discovered hidden depths and capabilities they had never bothered to explore. That evening, Daniel came over for our weekly dinner, a tradition we had established as part of rebuilding our relationship. As we sat at my kitchen table eating pot roast and discussing his work week, I realized that the ordeal we had been through had ultimately brought us closer together than we had been in years. Mom, he said as we were cleaning up, I have something to tell you. Cassandra and I have decided to divorce. It's amicable. But we both realized that too much damage has been done to our trust in each other. I wasn't surprised, but I was sorry for the pain I knew he was experiencing. How are you feeling about that decision? Sad, but also relieved. I've learned things about her priorities and her character that I can't unknow. And I've learned things about myself, too. About how I was willing to doubt the people who actually deserved my loyalty, in order to keep peace with someone who was manipulating both of us. The children will be okay, I said, though I knew he was worried about them. Children are resilient, and they'll benefit from having parents who are honest with them, and with themselves. As Daniel prepared to leave, he hugged me tightly, the way he used to when he was young, and needed reassurance that everything would be all right. "Thank you, Mom," he said, "for fighting back, for not letting us get away with treating you badly, and for still being willing to forgive us when we figured out how wrong we were." After he left, I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. My phone was quiet, my reputation was restored, and my family relationships were healthier than they had been in years. The viral video that was supposed to portray me as a declining old woman had instead revealed me to be exactly what I had always been, a competent, independent person who deserved to be treated with respect. Sometimes, I reflected, the best thing that can happen to you is when someone tries to diminish you, and fails completely. It forces you to remember who you really are, and it shows everyone else exactly what you're capable of when you decide to stop accepting less than you deserve. The house was mine, the truth was public, and my dignity was intact. It had taken 73 years, but I had finally learned that the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to show people exactly who you are. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I was reading the morning newspaper on my back porch when I heard the sound of children's laughter coming from the house on Maple Street. Daniel had called the night before to let me know that my grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, would be staying with him for the entire summer while Cassandra established her new life in Phoenix, where she had taken a job with a marketing firm that specialized in crisis management for social media influencers. The irony of her career choice wasn't lost on any of us. I set down my newspaper and walked over to the fence that separated my property from Daniel's backyard, where I could see Emma, now 16, pushing her younger brother Jacob on the swing set that Daniel had installed the previous spring. They both looked taller and more mature than when I had last seen them at Christmas, and I felt the familiar pang of regret that comes from missing too much of your grandchildren's daily lives. "Grandma Beulah," Jacob called out when he spotted me. At 12, he was all arms and legs and enthusiasm, still young enough to be genuinely excited about spending time with family. "Dad said you might teach me how to make your famous chocolate chip cookies while we're here." "I would love that," I called back. "Come over whenever you're ready, and we'll start with the most important lesson, how to cream butter and sugar properly." Emma looked up from her phone, where she had been taking pictures of the garden. At 16, she was more reserved than her brother, but she smiled and waved. "Hi, Grandma. Dad showed us the articles about you from last year. I can't believe Mom did that to you." It was the first time either of my grandchildren had mentioned the situation directly, though Daniel had told me they were both aware of what had happened, and had been dealing with their own complicated feelings about their mother's actions. Emma, in particular, had been struggling with the realization that much of her childhood had been documented and shared online without her full understanding of what that meant. "Your mother made some mistakes," I said carefully. "But people can learn and grow from their mistakes if they choose to. The important thing is that we focus on building good relationships with each other going forward." Later that afternoon, Jacob knocked on my kitchen door with flour in his hair and chocolate on his cheek, carrying a plate of slightly lopsided but perfectly edible cookies that we had made together. Behind him, Emma followed with a more hesitant expression, like she wasn't sure she would be welcome. "Grandma," Emma said as we all settled around my kitchen table with glasses of milk, "can I ask you something kind of personal?" "Of course, sweetheart. When you found out about Mom's video, were you more hurt or more angry?" I considered the question carefully, aware that my answer would probably stay with Emma for a long time. I think I was more disappointed than anything else. Hurt and angry, yes, but mostly disappointed that people I loved had such a limited understanding of who I really was. Emma nodded slowly. "I think I know what you mean. Sometimes I feel like Mom never really saw me as a separate person, just as part of her content. like I was a prop in her story instead of having my own story. Jacob looked up from his cookie, confused. What do you mean? Emma glanced at me, then back at her brother. Jake, do you remember how Mom was always taking pictures of us and posting them online? How she would make us redo conversations or activities if she didn't get the right shot the first time? Yeah, but I thought that was just what moms did. It's not, though. Most moms don't turn their kids' lives into a business. Most moms don't have their kids' entire childhoods documented online for strangers to comment on. I could see that Emma had been thinking about these issues for a while, probably processing the connection between what her mother had done to me and what she had been doing to her children all along. At 16, she was old enough to understand the implications of having her entire life curated for public consumption. Emma, I said gently, have you talked to your dad about how you're feeling about all this? A little. He feels really guilty about not protecting us from it sooner, but I think he's also still figuring out how to be a parent without Mom directing everything. Jacob finished his cookie and looked back and forth between his sister and me. Are you guys talking about how Mom made everything weird by always taking pictures? Something like that, Emma said. It's just that now that I'm older, I realize how strange it was to have our whole family life turned into entertainment for people we don't even know. Over the following weeks, as the children settled into their summer routine with Daniel, I found myself spending more time with them than I had since they were very young. Without Cassandra's presence to mediate and control our interactions, I was able to develop genuine relationships with both of them, based on their actual personalities and interests, rather than their roles in their mother's social media narrative. Jacob, I discovered, was fascinated by real estate and business, probably because he had inherited some combination of his grandfather Harold's analytical mind and my own practical approach to financial management. He spent hours with me going over property listings, learning how to calculate rental yields and understand market trends. By the end of June, he could explain the basics of property investment better than most adults. Emma was more interested in photography, but not the kind her mother had practiced. She wanted to capture real moments and genuine emotions, not staged scenes designed for maximum engagement. I gave her Harold's old film camera, and she spent the summer learning how to develop photos in the darkroom I set up in my basement. There's something different about film, she told me one afternoon as we hung prints to dry. You can't just take 100 shots and pick the best one. You have to really think about what you're trying to capture before you press the shutter. That's a good metaphor for a lot of things in life, I said. Sometimes taking time to think before you act makes all the difference. It was during one of these photography sessions that Emma brought up something that had been bothering her. Grandma, do you think Mom will ever really understand why what she did was so wrong? I considered the question while examining a print Emma had made of Jacob reading in the garden, unaware he was being photographed. The image captured something authentic about his concentration and contentment that no staged photo ever could. I think your mother understands intellectually that she made mistakes, I said finally. But understanding why something was wrong and feeling genuine remorse for the harm you caused are two different things. I'm not sure she's capable of the second one. What's the difference? Understanding is about recognizing that your actions had consequences you didn't intend. Remorse is about feeling genuine sorrow for the pain you caused, regardless of your intentions. Your mother has apologized for the consequences, but I don't think she's ever truly grasped how it felt to be treated the way she treated me. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I don't think she understands how it felt to be us either. Like, she's sorry that we're upset about the social media stuff, but I don't think she really gets why it bothers us so much. That's probably accurate. Some people have a hard time seeing situations from other people's perspectives, especially when admitting fault would require them to fundamentally change how they see themselves. As July turned into August, I began to notice changes in both children that suggested they were processing their family situation in healthy ways. Jacob was more confident and self-directed, taking initiative on projects and expressing his opinions more freely. Emma was less anxious and perfectionistic, more willing to try new things without worrying about whether the results would be worthy of documentation. Both of them were also developing a stronger relationship with Daniel, who seemed to be finding his footing as a single parent. He had taken time off work to spend the summer with them, and I could see him rediscovering the joy of being present with his children without the constant pressure to make every moment Instagram-worthy. One evening in late August, as we were all sitting on Daniel's back porch after dinner, Emma surprised me with a question that showed how much she had been thinking about the events of the previous year. "Grandma, when you decided to fight back against Mom's video, were you scared about how it would turn out?" "Terrified," I admitted. I had no idea if people would believe me, or if I would just make things worse for everyone. "So why did you do it?" I thought about how to explain the decision in a way that would make sense to a 16-year-old, because I realized that staying quiet and hoping things would get better on their own wasn't working. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk making things temporarily worse in order to create the possibility of making them permanently better. Jacob looked up from the card game he and Daniel were playing. "Is that why you evicted us? To make things permanently better?" "Partly," I said, "but also because I needed you all to understand that actions have consequences, even when they're directed at people you think won't fight back." Daniel laid down his cards and looked at me directly. "Mom, I need you to know that this year has taught me things about parenting and family relationships that I should have learned a long time ago. Watching how you handled everything and seeing how the kids have responded to having more authentic relationships has shown me how much we were all missing when everything had to be performed instead of just lived." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "I mean that for years we were all playing roles in your mom's version of what our family was supposed to look like, instead of just being ourselves and building real connections with each other. This summer has been the first time in a long time that I felt like I really know who you and Jacob are as people, not just as characters in someone else's story." As the summer drew to a close and we began preparing for the children to start their new school year, I realized that the crisis that had seemed so devastating a year earlier had ultimately led to the most genuine family relationships I had experienced in decades. We had all learned to value authenticity over appearance, substance over surface, and honest communication over conflict avoidance. The morning before Emma and Jacob were scheduled to return to Phoenix for the school year, Emma knocked on my kitchen door with an envelope in her hand and an expression that mixed nervousness with determination. "Grandma, I wrote something, and I want to show it to you before I decide what to do with it." Inside the envelope was a typed essay titled, "Growing Up as Content: What It's Like When Your Childhood is a Brand." Emma had written a thoughtful, mature piece about the experience of having her life documented and monetized from an early age, the pressure of performing happiness for strangers on the internet, and the process of learning to value privacy and authenticity. "This is remarkable, Emma," I said after reading it twice. "It's honest and insightful, and it could help other young people who are going through similar experiences. What are you thinking about doing with it?" My English teacher said there's a contest for teen writers about social media and digital citizenship. I was thinking about submitting it, but I'm worried about how Mom will react if it gets published somewhere. I looked at my granddaughter, who at 16 was grappling with questions about truth-telling and family loyalty that most adults never have to face. "Emma, what matters more to you? Protecting your mother from the consequences of her choices, or helping other kids understand that they don't have to live their entire lives for other people's entertainment?" When you put it like that, it seems obvious. It's not obvious at all. You're being asked to choose between loyalty and integrity, and that's one of the hardest choices anyone ever has to make. But I think you already know what the right answer is for you. Emma submitted her essay to the contest and won second place. When it was published in a national magazine for teenagers, it was picked up by several news outlets and became part of a broader conversation about children's privacy rights in the age of social media. She received dozens of messages from other young people who thanked her for articulating feelings they had never been able to express. Cassandra, predictably, was furious about the essay and accused Emma of betraying the family for attention. But Daniel supported Emma's decision completely and even helped her prepare for the media interviews that followed the essay's publication. "She's learning to use her voice to help other people," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "That's exactly what I want her to learn from watching how you handled everything last year." As autumn settled over Riverside and the children adapted to their new school routines, I found myself reflecting on how much my life had changed since that Tuesday morning when I first saw Cassandra's viral video. The woman who had been portrayed as confused and declining had not only reclaimed her dignity, but had inadvertently sparked a broader conversation about how society treats elderly people, how social media can distort reality, and what happens when our assumptions about others turn out to be completely wrong. My property management business had actually grown as a result of the publicity, with several new clients seeking me out specifically because they had read about my competency and success. I had been invited to speak at conferences about elder rights and social media responsibility, and had even been consulted by lawmakers working on legislation to protect elderly people from digital exploitation. But more importantly, my family relationships had been rebuilt on foundations of honesty and mutual respect, rather than performance and convenience. Daniel had become a more engaged and thoughtful parent. Emma was developing into a young woman with strong values and clear boundaries. And Jacob was learning that authentic relationships are built through genuine interest in other people, rather than strategic social positioning. One crisp October morning, I was working in my garden when I noticed a car I didn't recognize pulling into Daniel's driveway. A woman in her 40s got out, followed by a teenage boy who looked to be about Emma's age. They knocked on Daniel's door, and I could see them having an animated conversation with him on the front porch. A few minutes later, Daniel walked over to my fence and called out, "Mom, could you come over for a minute? There's someone I'd like you to meet." The woman introduced herself as Linda Morrison, and her son was Tyler. They had driven down from Sacramento after reading Emma's essay and tracking down our contact information through the magazine that had published it. "Mrs. Powell," Linda said, "I hope you don't mind us showing up unannounced, but I needed to meet the family that helped my son understand he wasn't alone." Tyler was tall and quiet, with the kind of serious expression that comes from dealing with adult problems at a young age. His mother explained that he had been featured in his stepmother's blended family lifestyle blog since he was 10 years old, often in posts that discussed his behavior, his grades, his social struggles, and his adjustment to his parents' divorce. "I felt like I was living in a fishbowl," Tyler said quietly. "Every fight with my stepmom, every bad grade, every awkward moment became content for her blog. Her followers knew more about my personal life than my real friends did." Linda had been fighting for years to get her ex-husband to set boundaries around Tyler's online presence, but she had been dismissed as jealous and difficult. It wasn't until Emma's essay was published that Tyler had found the words to explain to his father how the constant documentation was affecting his mental health and his ability to form genuine relationships. "When I read what Emma wrote about performing childhood instead of living it, everything clicked for me," Tyler said. "I finally understood why I felt so fake all the time, why I was always worried about whether my real feelings were appropriate for public consumption." We spent the afternoon talking about the challenges of protecting children's privacy and authenticity in an age when family life is increasingly treated as entertainment. Linda had successfully convinced her ex-husband to remove Tyler from his stepmother's blog, and Tyler was working with a therapist to process his experiences and develop healthy boundaries around social media. As they prepared to leave, Linda thanked me for having the courage to fight back against Cassandra's video. "If you hadn't stood up for yourself so publicly, if you hadn't shown people that it's possible to challenge these narratives, Tyler might never have found the courage to speak up about his own situation." After they left, I sat on my front porch as the sun set behind the orange trees, thinking about the unexpected ways that standing up for yourself can ripple outward to help people you never even knew existed. The story that had started with my humiliation in a viral video had somehow become part of a larger conversation about dignity, authenticity, and the courage to refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your humanity. That evening, Emma called me from Phoenix to tell me about a letter she had received from a girl in Vermont whose grandmother had been pressured into a nursing home after a nephew posted videos suggesting she was no longer capable of living independently. The girl had shown Emma's essay to her parents, who had started asking more questions about the nephew's motivations and the grandmother's actual capabilities. "It turns out the nephew was trying to get access to her house," Emma told me. "When the family actually talked to the grandmother directly instead of just believing what he told them, they discovered she was managing her finances perfectly well and didn't want to leave her home at all." "What happened?" "She's back in her house now, and the nephew has been cut off from access to her affairs. But Grandma, the girl said that if she hadn't read my essay, her family probably would have just gone along with what the nephew was saying, because it seemed easier than questioning it." As winter approached and the one-year anniversary of Cassandra's original video drew near, I found myself in the unexpected position of being contacted by researchers, journalists, and advocacy groups who were studying the broader implications of what had become known as the Beulah Powell case. A sociology professor from UC Riverside interviewed me for a paper about how families navigate intergenerational power dynamics in the digital age. A lawyer from the AARP asked me to contribute to their guide for elderly people dealing with digital exploitation by family members. A documentary filmmaker wanted to include my story in a film about social media misinformation and its real-world consequences. Each conversation reinforced my understanding that what had happened to me was part of a much larger pattern of how society treats aging people, particularly women, and how digital platforms can amplify and accelerate harmful stereotypes about cognitive decline and family burden. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. In December, I received a letter from the California Association of Real Estate Professionals, informing me that I had been selected to receive their Lifetime Achievement Award for my contributions to ethical property management and my advocacy for elderly rights in housing situations. The letter mentioned that my case had prompted several changes in state regulations about familial housing arrangements, and had contributed to new protections for elderly property owners against exploitation by relatives. At the award ceremony, which Daniel and the children attended with enormous pride, I was asked to give a brief speech about my experience. Standing at the podium in a room full of people who understood the complexities of property ownership and family dynamics, I felt a profound sense of completion. A year and a half ago, I began, I was portrayed in a viral video as a confused old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. Today, I'm being honored for 40 years of successful business management and ethical practice. The difference between those two versions of me isn't that I changed. The difference is that I finally stopped allowing other people to define who I was. I paused to look out at the audience, many of whom had followed my story in the news. We live in a time when it's easy to make assumptions about people based on limited information, when it's tempting to believe simple narratives that confirm our existing biases. But behind every viral video, every social media post, every sensational headline, there are real people with complex lives and stories that can't be reduced to a 47-second clip. The applause was warm and sustained, but what moved me most was seeing Emma in the audience, taking notes in the small notebook she always carried for story ideas. At 17, she was already developing into a thoughtful observer of human nature, someone who understood the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to find deeper truths. After the ceremony, as we drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside, Daniel said something that stayed with me long after the evening ended. "Mom, I know this whole experience was traumatic for all of us, but I have to say that watching you handle it has been one of the most educational experiences of my life. You showed me what it looks like to stand up for yourself with dignity, to fight for truth without becoming bitter, and to turn a personal crisis into an opportunity to help other people." "I had good teachers," I replied, thinking of Harold and the many strong women who had shaped my understanding of resilience and grace under pressure. "Maybe, but you had to find the courage to apply those lessons when it really mattered. And you had to do it while the whole world was watching." As we pulled into my driveway, I reflected on how the story that had begun with public humiliation had ultimately become a story about the power of authentic relationships, the importance of standing up for truth, and the unexpected ways that our worst moments can sometimes lead to our most meaningful contributions. The house on Maple Street was dark, but I could see Daniel's silhouette in the kitchen window as he moved around, probably making his nightly cup of tea. Emma and Jacob were back in Phoenix, but they called every Sunday, and their summer visits had been extended to include spring break and most of December. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Powell, my name is Maria Santos, and I saw your speech tonight on the news. My daughter shared a video of my mother without permission last month, claiming she has dementia. After seeing your story, I'm finally ready to fight back. Could you recommend a lawyer?" I smiled as I typed back Robert's contact information, along with a note that she was welcome to call me if she needed someone to talk to who understood what she was going through. It seemed that even now, 18 months after Cassandra's viral video, my story was still helping people find the courage to stand up for themselves and their loved ones. Inside my house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table with the stack of mail that had accumulated during the day. Among the bills and catalogs was a handwritten letter from Emma, who still preferred to write important thoughts on paper rather than sending them digitally. "Grandma," she had written, "I've been thinking about something you said last summer about the difference between understanding and remorse. I think I finally understand what you meant. Mom understands that her actions had consequences she didn't expect, but she's never really felt sorry for the way she made you feel. She's sorry about getting caught and facing backlash, but she's not sorry about treating you like you were less important than her social media success." The letter continued, "I don't think she's capable of the kind of remorse you were talking about, because it would require her to see you as a complete person with feelings that matter as much as hers. And I don't think she's ever seen anyone that way, including me and Jacob. We were all just supporting characters in her story about herself." Emma's insight was remarkable for someone her age, but then again, she had been forced to think about these issues more deeply than most teenagers ever have to. Her experience of growing up as content had given her an unusual perspective on authenticity, empathy, and the difference between being seen and being truly understood. As I finished reading her letter and prepared for bed, I thought about the unexpected gifts that had emerged from what had initially seemed like an unmitigated disaster. My relationship with Daniel was stronger and more honest than it had been in years. My grandchildren and I had developed genuine connections based on shared interests and mutual respect. I had discovered reserves of strength and courage I hadn't known I possessed. And somehow, my story had become part of a larger conversation about dignity, authenticity, and the importance of refusing to let others diminish your humanity. The viral video that was supposed to portray me as diminished and confused had instead revealed me to be exactly what I had always been: a competent, independent woman with valuable contributions to make and important stories to tell. Sometimes, I thought as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, the best thing that can happen to you is when someone tries to make you smaller and fails completely. It forces you to remember exactly how large you actually are. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.